You are listening to Leading the Factory Forward with your host, Lynn Friest. We share interviews with manufacturing experts and strategies for embracing the digital future, recruiting a new workforce, finding new business. Lynn is an advanced manufacturing strategist and leadership consultant who is on a mission to show manufacturing leaders how to improve their current operations while preparing for a digital future. And here's your host, Lynn Friest.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Leading the Factory Forward. This is episode 32, and it begins a 5-part series on finding your workforce and developing talent for your organization. Now, this will be a little bit different episode because this first one is about becoming a silver entrepreneur. And it's a little bit about my journey that I've taken, but it's also about how you could maybe engage with silver entrepreneurs in your business and use them as some additional talent. But in this first one, I'll be describing a little bit about how I got started on this journey. Now, some of the additional episodes we're going to have is next time we'll be talking about understanding and speaking with millennials. And following that, we'll be talking about how do you work with apprenticeship programs. I have some examples that I know about and want to share with you. And then we're going to do a session on how to find and engage with virtual talent. How do you get this part-time help, the help that can help you do all these different tasks that you don't have time for or the skills for? And then finally, we're going to do a thing on lessons from the book, Toyota Talent. So as I said before, today will be a little bit different. I'm going to talk to you about encore careers, what I call the silver entrepreneur. And since I've been on that path myself, I'm going to share some of the things about my journey so far, and it's certainly not yet finished. I experienced a very full, rewarding career in manufacturing for over 40 years. As I became eligible for retirement, I decided to reinvent myself and start a new career. For several years leading up to retirement, I'd begun preparing myself to begin that new chapter. I researched the available books online and material around for creating a consulting practice. Now, in 2009, I actually had a chance to retire and launch a new career. I did a lot of research, but in the end decided at that time it wasn't the right thing to do for financial reasons. But I also found that there was a comfort and safety in my long time in the corporate cocoon. So again, it wasn't the right time, but I was all that time preparing. And the research did help because it helped me learn faster some of the skills and helped me think about new skills that I might need. But some of the things that kept me in my cocoon, as it were, and things I recognized that would change when working for myself, in the past, my value proposition was defined for me by the work, my job, whatever the assignment I had was. My work had structure and framework to it, defined by, again, the business and where I was at. And then I had defined customers, and what I delivered to people and how I delivered it was pretty well structured for me. So as I go out, I have to start doing things differently. Now, I did have a desire and continue to have desire. I want to share the things I have learned with a new audience. I want to reach a wider group of people to connect with those who are receptive to the things I have to say. When I began, I thought it was just about setting up an LLC and creating a website. But then people started asking me pointed questions. A friend said, "What do you do and what can I pay you for?" And I really didn't have an answer for that. I could kind of wander on about the things I've done in my career, but it sounded more like a resume than what I could do to really help them. So that became a key question. What do you do and what can I pay you for? Then once I started, I realized that the actual practice of being in a consulting practice, actually, you had to try it out. You had to do it. You couldn't just use book learning. You had to go out and practice in public. But I attended a variety of classes, and I worked with other beginning entrepreneurs and learned new skills and technology, learned things about marketing, connecting, and developing things like my value proposition that I've talked about in earlier episodes. And I'll say quite honestly, my biggest struggle was with confidence. Coming from a place where I had a high level of expertise, I was not used to publicly being bad or unskillful at something. And something like blogging or speaking or marketing, I was still learning those skills. And again, not used to the fact that, okay, I'm kind of stumbling along here. I don't like that feeling. Another thing I found earlier is that with almost complete freedom to structure my time, I was somewhat less effective. It was always easy to get distracted and follow down different paths to something that wasn't really moving me forward. I had to start thinking about how do I maintain my focus. I can't do all the good ideas I see. How do I focus in on the key ideas I really need to do? Now, I am personally a person who likes to study and research an idea or skill. I always want to be very knowledgeable on a subject before I demonstrate it in public. I want to look good doing something, and therefore people can accept me and think well of me. But one of the things I did to help, get through some of this is I joined a mastermind group of people who were building their own businesses and were involved in marketing their businesses. Now, almost all of these businesses or practices were different than mine. But again, many of the principles in starting a small business or a consulting business are very much the same. Now, over the 2 years I worked with this group, they gave me support and encouragement as I made the many small steps I needed to make. But they also gave me some tough love to challenge me to take more explicit actions on building my business. Again, I mentioned I'm also subject to chasing every new or novel idea that I run into. I would research it, and then before really starting to practice this, I would find another new idea. This group helped bring me back to ground and called me out and said, pick one idea and implement it before you move to the next one. Now, while I was making all these small steps, I realized that I was getting stuck on some skill areas that I have not been able to develop. And I had an opportunity in an informal meeting to really look at what are the actions or skills that I was getting stuck on. I found that some I could actually outsource to others. Now, some of that happened rather suddenly, but it was the idea that, you know what? It's going to take me a long time to learn how to do this, and I know that other people already know how to do it, and they can do it for a reasonable cost. Another big thing I did was attended a lean startup program with a friend, and I was there to help him with his business. But learning that process helped me to appreciate the need to do customer discovery and to launch with a minimally viable product. I didn't have to have all the answers for everything I offered people, but I had to have a core framework, some core things that I could give them right away to help them get started on the problems that they had. But again, jumping back to this, having other people help me, I got a designer to make some improvements to my blog and my graphics. Then I got a virtual assistant to help with some of the editing in my writing and posting to my blog. Next, I hired a photographer to provide me with some photos of me and to be used on my blog and my podcast. So I had professional-looking photos. Then, since I was new to podcasting, and there's a fair amount of technology involved in that, although in today's world it's not overwhelming, but it was a matter of how do I use my time? So I was stuck on some of the published aspects of my podcast, and I hired a person to take my rough audio files, clean them up, and publish them. And this, took away excuses for why I was stuck, why I wasn't moving forward. And it just freed me up so that I wasn't anxious about, I don't know how to do this podcasting thing. Now I just don't have to worry about it. I focus on what am I doing to help my customers? How am I creating the value that they're going to need? And get away from worrying about how do I do some little technical detail. So with that being a bit of my story, I want to suggest to you that there are basically 4 steps to becoming a silver entrepreneur. And again, I say silver because I've had a long career myself, but this would be true of almost any entrepreneur. So I've taken my experience and put it into this framework of 4 things to help you craft your path forward. The first one is develop your mindset. The second one is to create your value proposition for an expertise business. The third, I've talked about earlier, find out what are the skills in people, technology, and business that you can either build or hire other people to do. And then finally, you have to start creating an action plan. You have to figure out how to do deliberate practice on those skills you want to build, and then really a learning plan so that you have a sequence of things you're going through as you expand your growth and develop your business. I can hope these things would help you save time, but they will never eliminate the effort that you have to put in. You have to stretch yourself, you have to grow, and I think this term I've often used is you really have to learn how to be comfortable practicing in public. But this can help give you a map towards sharing your expertise and again, helping other people with what you know. Another thing is, this whole business, success in this business is built with small, consistent actions, and every time you take action, it helps you build momentum. You're only going to learn the job by doing the job, as we probably well know from our experience in the corporate world. So the first one, mindset. Again, there's a variety of those, and in one of my earlier episodes, I talked about lenses to describe, how to choose your goals. Well, the whole idea here is, as I've talked about earlier, this mindset is, I'm going to practice in public. I'm going to make a plan. So it's really organizing yourself to create a business. Your value proposition. You have to kind of work on your teachable point of view, which is a thing from leadership development, but it's really true. Okay, I've got this knowledge, but I actually have to create something, a way to talk to people about it. And how can I map that onto something they need done? Now, this value proposition I talked about in episode 21. And again, you can always refer to the downloads in my podcast for information on some of these topics. But in brief, What do you offer? What are the products and service you offer? Can you write them out? How do you create gains for the customer? Based on what I know, the knowledge I can share, how does that create a gain? How do you eliminate the pains for the customer? There's something out there that I know that they're going to run into. How can I help them avoid that? And then from the customer perspective, what do they aspire to? As you look at your potential customers, what are the things they really want to do and accomplish in their business or their life or whatever it is you're going to help them with? And likewise for the pains, the things that irritate them. And then you can be somewhat routine, I think in terms of productivity tools or approaches, simply what are the jobs they're trying to do? How could you help them be more effective in almost, I'll say routine things, but things that they're common knowledge but not common practice? So how can you just help people do that? So again, that value proposition, you want to look for the fit between what's the problem they have and what's the knowledge you have and how can you provide a solution to their problem. Then you talk about skill sets for an expertise business. And a great resource for some of this is, especially on working in the personal brand space, is a book called Platform by Michael Hyatt. And I'll have a link to that in the show notes. But here, if you're going to be a coach or a consultant, a knowledge leader, here are some of the elements you may want to consider. Think about what social media avenues are used by your proposed audience. Consider producing a blog or a podcast so you can share your thinking. Then make a list or have somebody help you think through the technology tools that can get you started. And here's some of the ideas I've thought through is on the online world or in sales in general, there's this idea of know, like, and trust. So whether you're creating a website or you're posting on social media, are you generating things that will help people know, like, and trust you? The like and trust, some of the things that you could find that are intriguing to people that they'll become interested in what you have to say. And it could be your personal story like I've shared with you earlier in this episode. Another thing you might consider, especially in today's world, is create a 2-minute video so people can see you and get a gut feeling. And it's easier than it's ever been before to do this. It doesn't have to be polished, and that's okay. People like authentic more than they like polished. What you're shooting for in this 2-minute video, and you can redo it anytime you want and create a new one, is you're shooting for done, not perfect. The people that help me keep emphasizing, because I like to have perfect, they'd say, no, done is the most important part of doing anything. Now, as you look at your potential business activities, if you have a lot of knowledge and experience, there's many things you could do, but you got to start paring it down. What's a key thing that people need that you know how to do? And you got to decide what are you not going to do or who you're not going to work for. You need to really sharpen your focus on who's your ideal customer, who would be the best fit for you and them. And as you look at the skill sets, again, I talked about editing blog posts. If you're not comfortable with some of that, find someone is and have them do it for you. You should think about the skill sets, and whether it be in that book Platform or other things you can find online, there may be a ton of skills that are needed to run your expertise business, but maybe you only need to develop 5 of those skills and then have somebody else, 5 other people that have expertise in each of those other 5 skills you need, have others do that. When you decide what you're going to choose to do and what others do, consider hiring out the things that have a high threshold of learning. In other words, if you're going to have to devote months to figuring out how to do some technical aspect to something, it's kind of like we tend to have accountants and people who do our taxes. Is it that we can't do those things? No, but there's just a high threshold of learning. It's better to have somebody else do them. The other thing is, whether it be with photos or how you approach social media, but look at your professional image. In the business world, that was still important, but now it's even more important. So hire someone to design graphics for you and get professional photography done, but don't worry about overdoing things. Again, authentic is very useful. So you can use your own photos if need be. Just be mindful of that. Another thing that might come up is in today's world, you can use all kinds of data and analytics with respect to how you're doing with reaching people. How is your message getting out? So again, either develop that skill yourself, or you can certainly find people who can help you figure out, are you being effective in how you're reaching out to people? Are they hearing your message? Have you found parts of your message that resonate more strongly with others? And again, in this whole process, you want to make it very easy to find, connect, and work with you. You want to reduce the friction for people to be able to connect with you. And then finally, thinking about how you're going to reach out, not just for customers, but who are the people that can help support you? Who are the people you can learn from? So you want to develop your networks and participate in networks that are around you. 1, to be connecting with customers, but 2, to help in your own learning journey. You need to develop your own network for how you're going to learn. So as far as, next solid steps, and I always try to give you something to work on, the first thing I would recommend is look for a startup program. They're funded by different organizations. The National Science Foundation has what's called the Innovation I-Corps, which is a class, and it's built on a guy by the name of Steve Blank, who did the lean startup stuff. So that's the kind of thing where it can really get you started. Again, this lean startup methodology helps you put the whole business picture together. And I think I've even talked about this in some earlier sessions too. And then having gone through one of these programs, and it could be a weekend program or it could be over a series of weeks, depending on these different programs that are offered, but it'll give you sort of encapsulate all the things you need to start doing for your business. But then start thinking about deliberate practice. And it may be practice in going out asking customer questions. It may be practice on how to craft a blog post or a podcast. It may be practicing on how do you make effective posts on LinkedIn. Or even how do you make an effective short speech to a group at your Chamber of Commerce. So another one, when I talk about this, the whole idea of deliberate practice or focused work, episode 26 is another reference you can use around focused work. How do you carve out the time to actually focus in on one narrow thing and really develop your skill in that area? So again, I want to encourage you as a wrap up here to download the notes for this session. You can scan some of my older podcasts to see what other ideas that support the work here in becoming a silver entrepreneur. And this wraps up this session of it. But again, this is the first of our 5-part series on developing workforce and talent. The next one is going to be about understanding and speaking with millennials. And it comes from a book called Answering Why by Mark Perna. And I've also heard Mark speak several times about, again, how do you talk with the new and upcoming talent in the world? How do you connect with them? How do you bring them into the manufacturing arena? Because often they're just not thinking about that. So also, I would love to have you share a comment or share a rating in iTunes or just drop me a line if any of this sparks your thinking. Thanks for listening, and talk to you next time.